Have you ever made a handmade card so detailed it looks like a tiny piece of art? In this video, I'm showing you how to make a couple of adorable cockatoo cards, complete with layered wings, tropical foliage, and a dimensional background. I'll share my favorite ink blending tricks and assembly tips for tiny die cut pieces. And in the second card, I'll even show you how to flip a die cut to make a mirrored bird. Whether you're a card making pro or just love cute designs and building 3D scenes, you won't want to miss this one. Let's dive in. Let's start with the 3D scene card featuring a beautiful cockatoo among some lush tropical foliage set into a 3D background. And it's so cute. I'll be using the Flying High die set from Spellbinder's Cheerful Chirps collection for this one, and it's packed with details. For the card background, I'll use the two larger dies from the Tunnel Clouds collection die set to give the card a 3D effect. For the sentiment, I'm using one from the Spread Your Wings stamp set, also from the Cheerful Chirps collection. So let me complete all the die cutting off camera, and I'll be back once that part is done. I'm back and look at all the details. I also went ahead and ink blended the background panels and all the die cuts. I die cut 3 sets of tropical foliage and colored each in with a shade of green and teal. I colored the smaller leaves using 2 shades of green, applying the darker color to the base of the leaves. I also cut out 2 tree branches and used Altenews paperback ink on them. You'll see me do all of the coloring when I show you the second card. My filming was a little haphazard this time, and I apologize for that. I cut out the pieces for the cockatoo and used pink and gray on them. I've included all the inks I've used in my list of supplies in my blog post, which I'll link in the video description below. Now for the wings, I blended a couple of ink shades here as well. The wings have multiple die cut layers assembled together to give them dimension, which I'll show you in just a bit. There are also little flowers, and I went with a 2-tone blue look with yellow centers for these. They're made up of 3 layers, and I'll show you how to align them as well. Next up, we have the little stems for the flowers, plus the cockatoo's head, body, crest, and the wings. Lots of tiny parts here. I also prepped the background panels. I did some quick ink blending, but didn't bother blending the centers since those will be cut out using the large Tunnel Clouds dies. I'll only keep the outlines. Let's get all these tiny parts off to the side and start the assembly. So I've got my magnetic glass mat and my Barely Art glue ready to go. Now the cockatoo has several pieces and it's quite detailed. I've got the feet, cheek, and eye bits all laid out. One of the really helpful features here is that the die cut pieces have etched guidelines, so you can easily see where to line the pieces up. And you can see the etched line on the body piece to aid with placement. Here you see me add glue to the entire wing, but I should have only adhered the top bit and left the bottom part unglued. That would add some extra dimension and movement. Unfortunately, I thought of it a little too late and can't lift that edge any longer since it's stuck down well. See that nice little lift at the edge? It's a lovely detail that allows your design to shine. The head follows the etched lines as well, so there's no guessing here. The feet go underneath the wings and the tail goes on after that. Since I'll be tucking a tree branch under the bird's feet later on, I won't be applying glue behind the feet. The eye has 2 pieces to it, a larger circular piece that goes behind the head and the smaller one for the pupil. I had to be really careful so I don't lose them. I colored in the eyeball and that will go right over the white circular piece. Last but not least is the beak that again follows the contour of the base and the etchings on the front. And there she is, adorable cockatoo. Look how sweet she looks. I'll set her aside to dry while we move on. I'll speed you through the assembly of the foliage in the segment and skip the blue flowers since I use the same die set on the second card, and I show you a detailed coloring and assembling for it there. I'm loving the soft muted blues and greens here. What do you think? Do you like it? This set of leaves has a central piece and you use one die to cut out the center as well as the tiny bud in one shot. It was a little confusing for me in the beginning, but then I figured it out. Time to add the foliage to the branches. My glass mat had started to become sticky with all the glue, so I decided to use a bit of non-stick paper from my adhesive sheets. This is a backing sheet from a sheet of stickers or adhesive, I can't remember which, and this is perfect because it will prevent the glue from oozing onto the mat and sticking the die cut to it. I was going to start adhering the second branch but realized I was missing the base for the center of the large leaf cluster. So I cut out one more set and used the Salmon Says Stamp Dew ink to color in the final piece. For the other centers, I used a mix of dew and cabbage, but since the base layer will be mostly covered by the top piece, I didn't blend the green. Now I'll layer these up and I won't glue it down entirely. If part of it hangs loose, it gives the piece a bit more dimension. See how it adds a lift when it's not fully glued down? That's the kind of detail I love. I'll attach these pieces to the second branch in a bit, but before I do that, I want to go ahead and cut out the background panels. I'll use the larger die for the top layer. Here's the first panel, and now I'll use the smaller die to cut out the center of the second one. I want the cuts to feel a bit more organic, not too straight or predictable, so I'm angling this just a bit. And this is what it looks like. I used Distress Oxide ink in tumble glass to create these panels, and I blended it on Bristol smooth paper, which is amazing by the way. The brushes I used are from Spellbinders and they work beautifully. The ink goes on like butter and the blend is perfectly smooth. That's thanks to both the paper and the brushes. Just look at how silky smooth that is. I used a very light hand on the first panel and then layered on the ink a few times on the second one. Not sure where this little blotch came from, but it'll be hidden behind the top panel. Now we are going to start assembling everything. I'm using a 5x7 card base and here's the plan. I'll glue the dark cloud layer directly onto the card base so I have a starting point and then finalize the arrangement, especially the placement of the cockatoo on the branch, and I also want to ensure I have room for the sentiment before I start adhering the rest of the pieces. If I have the branch running from behind the top layer like this, her feet will need to go right here. I'll slide some glue underneath her feet and attach her to the branch before anything else, so I know exactly where I want her to go. Let me grab my rag to press that into place gently. All right, now I can adhere this part so it stays in position. This is the full layout. Now that I have the arrangement the way I like it, I'll set it aside carefully and add foam tape to the front of the bottom panel. That will help keep the top panel undisturbed for now, but clearly I didn't estimate the width of the tape correctly. But fortunately, I was able to remove it without much struggle and replace them with the strips cut down to size again. To make the foam tape easier to handle since it doesn't have the backing, I'm sticking it onto a piece of release paper first. That way I can cut it with my long shears into strips, and that makes it super easy to work with. I always save backing paper from my adhesive and sticker sheets. It's so useful. You saw me use it twice in this video already. Now I'm adding quite a bit of liquid glue on top of the foam tape, so I have some wiggle time to reposition the panel if needed. Now I'll take a strip of cardstock and apply tiny amounts of glue behind the die cuts to hold them in place and prevent any snags. And done. Look how cute this turned out. Everything's in place and it looks fantastic. Now we just need a sentiment to finish it off. On the front, I've used "A little birdie told me it's your day," and on the inside I added "Hope your day soars with laughter and fun." Both are from the same stamp set, so they coordinate perfectly. And that's it. Isn't this just the sweetest card? All right, let's move on to the next one where I'll show you the trick with the mirrored die cut. So keep watching. I'll be using 2 die sets to make the next card, but I'll only use the smaller flower elements from the earlier Flying High set. So let me go ahead and take them out and pop them onto my die catcher. I'll be using the leaves, these flower dies, and also this one here called Free Hugs. I've cut everything out from white cardstock again because I'll do some ink blending on them. I also used the same sentiment from the stamp set. This set doesn't come with coordinating dies, so I just trimmed it down into a simple label shape. Now let's talk about these birds. I cut out the bird twice because I want to mirror them so they face each other. Because right now this bird is only facing in one direction. But you'll notice, and I'll show you here against a dark background, when you die cut a shape, the top side has beautifully smooth, rounded edges. If you flip it over, the reverse side has sharper, turned down edges, and you can clearly tell it's the wrong side. But I'll flip one of the birds so it looks mirrored, and I'll show you how I remove the sharpness from the edges so they look much more finished. I'll grab my glass mat and scoring tool first. I'll gently press down along the edges to soften them and smooth them out. Just a bit of light pressure to straighten out those edges. I don't know if you can tell on camera, but it already looks more rounded. If you compare it to the correct side of a die cut, it's obviously not perfect, but it still looks great. Definitely good enough for a facing pair of birds. Since one of the birds is flipped, I'll need to do this edge smoothing process on all the parts that go on it, like the wing, foot, tail, crest, everything. Now I'll use another technique. I'll rub around the edges of the piece with the stylus that comes with my Salmon Says Stamp score and pick tool, and that helps soften the look a bit more. Honestly, once it's assembled, you can barely tell that it's the reverse side. Let me add some texture to these tiny feather pieces. I'll just poke them in gently so they look more dimensional. You can see we've got some nice texture going on here. Again, it's not going to match the other bird exactly, but no two birds are identical anyway, right? That's the charm. Next up, the feet. This one's a bit delicate, so I'm taking extra care not to tear it. I could cut another one, but I'd rather avoid doing that. A little patience saves time in the long run. It's probably not visible on camera, but once I smooth it down, there are no sharp edges left. You really can't tell it's the wrong side. And now we can start coloring. I'm bringing in my Altenew Ultra Sticky Grip Mat. It has great traction over the glass mat, so nothing slides around while I ink, and it holds down all the tiny die cuts for me. I'll be coloring this in shades of gray and green using Altenew Silver Sage and Silver Lake inks. I forgot to smooth out the beak for the mirrored bird, so I'm doing that now and making sure the etchings are visible. I'm starting with Silver Sage. It's a really light green, but I think my ink pad's a bit dry as well, so I'm really pressing in to get enough color. I think I'll switch to Jade instead, since Silver Sage seems just a bit too light right now. That's much better. Now for the wing, I'm using Silver Lake. The sticky mat doubles up as an ink cube holder as well, since it grips the mat and doesn't move while I ink. Now I want to finish assembling the bird before moving on. Let me gently peel it off the grip mat. I almost lost the feet there. Now remember, normally you have etchings on the front side of a die cut that help you line everything up perfectly. Since we're flipping one of the birds, those etched guides aren't really visible. So I'm being extra careful to follow the contour of the bird's body when aligning the parts. Now for the eyes, they're tiny. I'll just color them in with a regular black gel pen. You could absolutely cut them out from black cardstock, but honestly I was just being lazy. And like the first cockatoo, this one has the same white circle base to place the eyeball on. Now I'll flip it over just to double check the eye placement, since I want the eyeball centered properly. I think I'll take a tiny bit of buttercream ink and just brush it on for just a little more contrast. I think that looks much better. You honestly can't even tell that this is the reverse side of the die cut. Of course, had my cutting plate not been so scratched up, it would have been a lot better. I couldn't find my new plates, or I would have used them instead. I guess I could have tried using copy paper to protect it, but I'm not sure how well that would have worked. Anyway, the first bird is done. It's looking super cute. I'll set that aside and start working on the second one. For this one, I'll use buttercream as the base and a little touch of jade for contrast. Yep, that looks good. Oh, I forgot to do the cheek. I'll come back to that in a second. Okay, back to Silver Lake and buttercream for the wing for some additional interest. These inks are great. They have smoothing agents, so they even out beautifully after a while. The first bird has already smoothed out quite a bit. Now for that cheek, I'll use Frosty Pink, or actually I'll just use whatever is left on my pink brush. There we go, just a tiny pop of pink. Let me bring the first bird back and add the cheek there too. That little bit of color adds so much charm. Look how cute that turned out. Now let's start on the branches. I've got two of them cut out, and these branches are actually from the Flying High set. This is paper bag, the brown that I'm using. Now I'll add a little gray denim for some added depth and contrast. I'll smoosh some ink onto my glass mat so I don't contaminate my gray ink pad with the brown from my grip mat. You can already see the brush has picked up some brown. If I dip this back into the pad, it would ruin it. So I'll just wipe off the brush with a baby wipe. Now for the flowers, I'm using Pinkfresh Studio inks for these, starting with sky blue. I'm not too worried about getting them perfectly even. Real flowers are never uniform anyway. Then I'll use Summer Shower for the detailed etched layer. That gives a nice depth. Next up, flower centers. I'm using Warm Sunshine from Altenew. Such a bright, cheerful yellow. For the leaves, I'm using Cabbage and Dew from Salmon Says Stamp. I like to wipe off my brushes first, just to have it. I love how this leftover strip looks. I can totally use it for another project. No waste here. Just adding some color variation to the leaves. And again, not striving for perfection, and I know these inks will smooth out once they dry. Now the coloring is all done. I'm setting everything aside and we're going to start on the background. For the background, I'm using a panel of this Strathmore Bristol Smooth Surface paper again, which is what I used for the first card as well. Its smooth surface is fantastic for ink blending, and since it's heavyweight, it's perfect for dry embossing too. I'm making a 5x7 card, so I'll cut the 9x12 sheet down to size. It's a bit too wide for my guillotine, but it still works. Since this is 9 inches long, I can measure 2 inches at one end and chop off those 2 inches to make it 7. Now for ink blending. I'm using Spellbinder's brushes again, which are fantastic. For the inks, I've got Distress Oxides in Bundle Sage and Shabby Shutters. These brushes glide beautifully over the paper and the results are super smooth. Starting with Bundle Sage, look how soft the blend is. The birds will look amazing over this background. I'm creating patches of color with each of the inks. Next, I'm adding Shabby Shutters just to bring in some pops of yellow-green. The background looks really pale, so I'll go back and layer a bit more of both colors to brighten them a bit more. I'm really happy with how this turned out. It's just so soft and dreamy. If you want tips on ink blending, I have a few videos that can really help. I'll link them below. Next, I'm using the Spellbinder's 3D embossing folder. Since Distress Oxide ink is water reactive, I'm not spraying the front, just a light mist of water on the back of the cardstock before embossing. Again, you'll find the list of supplies on my blog, which is linked in the video description. This embossing folder only needs the adapter plate, no extra shims. It's beautiful, absolutely stunning texture. I think I'll add touches of dew here and there to make everything pop a little bit more to avoid the birds from blending into the background. There, background is done. Now let's start assembling. I'll start with the flower centers, and you'll see etched lines that help with alignment. The broader end goes on the bottom, but it's not super strict. You could turn it the other way and it would still look lovely. Now I'll adhere all the pieces onto the card front, which will go onto the pre-made 5x7 card base. Once the panel is adhered, I find it much easier to handle the smaller die cuts because I don't have to move them around. I'm using foam tape to pop up the background panel. I like to remove the backing paper partially so the adhesive doesn't grab right away. And here's a trick. To help with alignment, I'll stick the card base and the panel into the corner and line up the edges and then pull away the rest of the backing paper from the foam strips. This ensures perfect alignment of the card front with the card base. And if you're interested, I've got some videos with hacks that'll take your card making to the next level. I'll link those in the video description if you haven't watched them already. There we go, perfectly aligned. Now I'll arrange the birds and flowers. Because the colors are really muted and within the same color family, I want the birds to pop off the background. So I'll adjust the placement and add a bit more of the dew ink to the background for contrast. Time to decide on where to put the sentiment. I'll adhere the sentiment first so I can lay out the other pieces around it. Time to glue down the birds and add in the foliage. It's looking really cute. Even though the palette is really muted, adding the pops of gray and blue make it work beautifully in my opinion. And the best part is that we stretched our supplies by mirroring the die cut, and unless you look super close, you'll never know. We got creative with what we had. If you'd like to stretch your tools and supplies, I recently created a video on 15 basic tools that are my absolute favorite and several more hacks that make these tools really essential in your craft room. You should check out that video here.